Well, tomorrow marks 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine, sparking the largest armed conflict in Europe since World War II. Here's a quick look back at how it started and where it stands. From the north, south, and east, tens of thousands of Russian troops and tanks stormed Ukraine on February 24, 2022. Russia expected to take Kyiv within days, but Ukraine's resistance was grossly underestimated. After early gains, Russia was held back. A Ukrainian counteroffensive even regained some lost territory. Funding from allies has been crucial. Billions of dollars and mass deliveries of weapons and equipment have helped power Ukraine's fight. But that lifeline is now on life support. Aid from the U.S. has dried up as Republicans block attempts to send more. And for months, it appeared the war was at a stalemate. But the tide has begun to turn in Russia's favor, with Ukraine running low on supplies. The human and economic toll has already been severe, as the United Nations estimates more than 10,000 civilians have been killed and up to 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers. Millions were forced to flee the country, and the country they left now wears the battle scars of war. The damage to buildings and infrastructure is estimated to be at $152 billion. Yuliya Kovaliv is Ukraine's ambassador to Canada. Ambassador, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
I'd like to start, if I could, with the situation on the battlefield, which is looking pretty grim in recent months. This week, Russia took over the city of Avdiivka. Ukraine says it's running low on ammunition because of slow deliveries from the West. How dire is the situation on the battlefield in your country right now?
You know that the situation is now significantly linked to the ability for Ukrainian soldiers to fight back, and also the way whether they have the ammunition, whether they have enough weapons to fight back. And the one thing what Ukraine is doing ourselves, we are significantly increasing our own defense sector, both with our Ukrainian capabilities, but also building the joint centers of production of different weapons in Ukraine with the global leaders, global defense companies. And also we are working and urging our partners to speed up the delivery of those type of weapons that have been promised to Ukraine, because that's important that our soldiers who are there now, who are now in the cold trenches, so they are well equipped to be able to fight back.
Are you getting any indications from your allies that deliveries will be sped up? We know the issues in the United States with that significant aid bill being held up by a small cohort of the Republican Party. We've seen insistence from countries like France that whatever the European Union buys in terms of munitions is bought within Europe, which can slow things down. I mean, how worried are you that domestic political considerations amongst the allies are getting in the way of the rapid delivery of the ammunition and weapons that you need?
We see that now many of the European countries stepped in with both the delivery of the military support, but also building these joint ventures to produce that both in Ukraine and in the EU and NATO countries, to be able both to supply to Ukraine and to increase stock, as many of the NATO countries are increasing their defense spendings. We just recently, Ukraine signed the security agreements with UK, with Germany, with France, today with Denmark, and each of this agreement includes also the big package for the military support, which is committed specifically for this year. Plus, European Union just make a decision for the 50 billion support package. So this is now the time when a lot of our partners are stepping up to be there in the moment when there is still the debate in US. And this is a very important moment just for the other partners to step in and to give the shoulder of support to Ukraine.
The U.S., though, seems critical, Ambassador. They have been the spine of the military support, certainly in the high-end military technology that your country has used to this point. How concerning is the political situation in the United States right now for the defense of Ukraine?
We are, of course, working with the Congress. We are working with a lot of friends of Ukraine so that the U.S. support continue for Ukraine, because it's important for all of us. It's important for the interest of all of the NATO countries, NATO member countries, because in reality, what is happening today, Ukraine is fighting to protect our own country, but also fighting to protect the eastern flank of NATO, to protect many of those countries who are neighboring with Russia. And Canada has also Russia as a neighbor in the Arctic. So it's in our joint interest to win this war, and so that Russia will learn their lesson once and for many decades ahead and forever, that it cannot by itself redraw the sovereign borders.
You mentioned that your country has recently signed security arrangements with the United Kingdom, with France, Germany, and Denmark. I understand Italy may be close. I know there are conversations with Canada. Draft proposals have been exchanged. How close are Ukraine and Canada to formalizing a security agreement?
The negotiation teams, both from our side and from the Canadian side, are working closely. You know, that this work is now in progress.
Okay, is it imminent, or is it too difficult to say, or am I getting you in trouble by asking you to try to give us a timeline on when this might be done?
No, there was this week, there were the consultations which were happening in Kyiv. So it's like the progress is good, and both teams are working very intensely.
Okay, I have to ask you a question as well. We focus a lot on the weapons and the ammunition shortages that President Zelensky has warned about and which we've seen on the battlefield. But we also see that Ukrainian lawmakers are considering a revised mobilization bill, which would expand the eligibility to be drafted into military service, and also put stiffer penalties for people who avoid the mobilization to stand in the defense of Ukraine. Is the concern right now, Ambassador, not just a munitions shortage, but possibly a shortage of soldiers because of this? Because we are seeing Russia grow its forces considerably in your country and in its own country. Is Ukraine also facing a shortage of people as this war enters its third year?
Of course, like there are the people, and many people who back 2 years ago, exactly the day that we will mark tomorrow on February 21st, voluntarily went to serve to protect the country. And many of them are fighting already 2 years with almost no pause. And of course, we need to provide rotations for them. So the people need to go home, the people need to have a rest, and we need to conscript more people so that it will be the rotation between them. And the new legislation that the parliament is now considering precisely is talking about it. So it will clearly define the length of how long the people are serving, and what will be the rotation period. And this will give more clarity. And of course, this will allow many people to have the clarity in how long they will serve, when they will come back home, what will be their training, how well they will be equipped. And these all are important things. In terms of the most important things, what I personally hear of a lot of my friends who are now serving of the most hottest spots is that the biggest motivation for the people who are serving, who are fighting on the front lines, is the weapons. As they are getting more weapons, more artillery shells, and they are able to fight back, this is the biggest motivation. Because if they are sitting for days and nights, and it's also winter in Ukraine, it's quite cold, and without the ability to fight back, of course, it's the people are desperate because they want to make a progress. They are ready to do it. They are well trained, and Canada supported a lot the training for Ukrainian troops. And this is the key thing. If the people understand that they are going to the front line, they will have all what they need to fight. It means including the long-range weapons, including the needed artillery shells. Of course, we will see much different situation on the front line.
It seems, though, 2 years in, this could still go for quite some time, because Russia had that rapid advance in the early stages of the war, and then your soldiers took back about half of the territory in the counteroffensive. But now, as we started this conversation, key cities like Avdiivka are being lost because of the ammunition shortage. There is also a U.S. presidential election happening later this year, and the war will likely not be done before Americans vote. How concerned is Ukraine about the possibility of a Donald Trump presidency, given everything he said about President Zelensky, about Vladimir Putin, and about NATO?
First of all, we are ready to work with all of the administration and all of the governments among our partners with the arguments why it's important and why Ukrainian victory is important. And I think, if we are looking on the battlefield and with these discussions, I think we are missing also one important point, which happened this year. And I will just give you the figure. In January this year, Ukraine has been able to export almost the same volume of cargo through the Black Sea ports as we've done pre-war. So there is a significant improvement what is happening on the Black Sea. Even without any Istanbul initiative, Ukraine was able to significantly destroy the Russian Navy fleet in the Black Sea. So now not only grain, but the other different cargo is going through the ports. And just recently, we were very successful in destroying Russian fighter jets. And I want to remind you, as we are looking on the situation on the front line, this is one of the cases of the full-scale war where, unfortunately, till now, Ukraine does not have prevail in the air. So we are waiting for the F-16 to be a great support of our troops on the ground, because now, unfortunately, Russia still prevails in the air. We have made a big progress in destroying within the recent 2 weeks a great number of Russian fighter jets, including one yesterday. So we will continue to do that. But of course, we are waiting for the delivery of the F-16, which will support our troops on the ground.
I just have one final question. You mentioned you know people who are fighting on the front lines. You've been in this diplomatic job throughout this war, but you're Ukrainian with friends and family in that country. Just how have you been holding up over these 2 years, and how do you feel personally as you're entering this third year of Russia's invasion?
Over the weekend, my cousin died. He was killed by Russians on the front line. He was 35. He has 2 children. So just to explain everybody, the war is very personal to each of us. And, there is no other way for us than to win this war. There is no other way that each of us having this grief and pain in our families, between our close ones, and the suffering of the all 40 million nation, we will fight till the end, because we want to live in our country. We want to live in our cities. We want to live on our land. And the key goal, what Russia wants, is just to erase Ukraine as a nation. And so with support or without support, we will fight. And it's important for all of our partners, all of our friends, to also ask tomorrow, on the 2nd year of the anniversary, what else we can do to end the suffering and to support our victory.
Yuliya Kovaliv, please accept my deepest sympathies on the loss of your cousin, and thank you so much for joining us today. Yuliya Kovaliv, Ukraine's ambassador to Canada. Thank you. For more on the 2nd year anniversary of Russia's war on Ukraine, we've assembled a group of diplomats from some key allied countries here in Ottawa. We're going to bring in Susanna Gajko. She's the United Kingdom's High Commissioner to Canada. Karina Hozelmeier is Deputy Head of Germany's mission to Canada, and Witold Jilski is Poland's Ambassador to Canada. Thank you all so much for coming in on an important day.
Thank you. Thank you.
High Commissioner, I'd like to start with you if I could. I mean, we've heard some dire warnings from President Zelensky this week about the lack of ammunition, forcing them to cede territory in eastern Ukraine. And the United States, which is such a core part of this, still can't get the latest aid package through its Congress. How concerned is the United Kingdom? How concerned are the allies right now?
Well, look, here we are 2 years into a war that nobody wanted apart from Putin and his cronies, and Ukraine have made some pretty remarkable achievements. They've shown real bravery and determination throughout. They've managed to recapture 50% of the territory that Russia took from them. Meanwhile, Putin's economy is collapsing and he's an indicted war criminal. But look, the reality of this is that this is not the moment now to lose our nerve. We need to keep up the pressure right now. We need to keep it up because victory for Ukraine is not guaranteed, and we have to ensure that Ukraine prevails. Lord Cameron, our Foreign Secretary, was speaking at the UN today, and he said that what we've seen with Russia is that if they are allowed to succeed without being restrained, then they come back for more. We must not let that happen now. We saw it in 2008, we saw it in 2014 with Russia. Now is the moment to stand up to Putin. We have the resources we need to allow Ukraine to succeed. We need to demonstrate now that we have the collective will.
So Deputy Ambassador, on that, clearly the West and the NATO allies have the resources they need, but President Zelensky says they're not getting there fast enough. Meanwhile, Russia is rearming at a surprising rate, spending about 6% of its GDP on military aid and stepping up its military recruitment. What does NATO, what do other countries need to do to speed things up for President Zelensky and his soldiers?
Yeah, we just made the message clear also last week at the Munich Security Conference. Chancellor Scholz talked to the key allies that we need to ramp up our efforts. We need to make sure that we're in it for the long haul, that we need to ramp up our production in ammunition. We need to get the material as fast as possibly to Ukraine. Just last week we signed the long-term security agreement with Ukraine, as had the UK already done in France. More partners are on the way, and this shows, it signals to Russia that we're in it for the long haul. We're standing shoulder to shoulder with our Ukrainian friends who so bravely defend their country.
But Ambassador, why do you think there is a slowness in the pace of delivery? This has been the consistent thing from Ukraine, in that they asked for lethal aid, and at first some countries refused to do that. Then they asked for air defense, and there's a refusal, and then they finally come around to it. And now the U.S. is stalled in a significant way because of what's happening in their Congress. I mean, how concerned are you about what's happening in the United States right now?
In all of those cases that you mentioned, Poland was on the lead in terms of pushing, whether it was military aid at the beginning, whether it was modern military aid like modern tanks, whether it was fighter jets. And we are still at this at the point of supporting the process and pushing. Polish politicians right now are working on that topic. Right now, the Polish foreign minister is in Washington, D.C., working with American Congress exactly on the topic that you've raised. And his main reason for going to Washington, D.C. is to have a conversation with his partners and to encourage the positive change in the decision making in that regard. You know, that money needs to flow. That equipment needs to flow to Ukraine. There is no other way.
You know, High Commissioner of the United Kingdom, like Poland, very early to the defense of Ukraine and at the forefront of demanding the escalation of the types of aid. If the U.S. doesn't get this through, and we all know what Donald Trump has said he would do should he win this election, do you think the UK, the EU, the other countries can give Ukraine what it needs to defeat Russia if America's position changes?
Well, I'm not going to get into speculation of what the US might or might not do. And it is important to say that so far they've been by far the largest contributor to Ukraine. So they are vital to Ukraine's success in this, no question. And we're really keen to see them move ahead with a clear demonstration of support for Ukraine. But the reality of this is that, as the Polish ambassador said, Ukraine's needs are enormous, and the priority now has to be on getting equipment into the hands of Ukrainians on the battlefield as soon as possible, and we all need to work together to achieve that.
So, Deputy Ambassador, how do you convince countries to accelerate what they're doing? Because the rhetoric is very clear that people are on board, but we see these large gestures from Denmark, for example, sending their entire stock of certain types of military equipment to Ukraine. How do Germany and other countries convince people to meet the moment that as is required?
We all know that in all of our countries it's a difficult debate, but our people need to know that it is our security that is on the line. It's a long-term investment in our security. And just yesterday, the German parliament passed a resolution so that the whole country has rallied behind the actions of the government to demonstrate that we need to provide the aid. We've been so far the second largest military donor to Ukraine. We need to step up aid, even though it costs us, even though our economies suffer. But if we don't do that now, the repercussions will be fatal.
What about things like long-range missiles? I know there was hope that Germany would send tourist missiles, the U.S. would send ATACMS. There's been a reluctance to do this. This feels like the familiar pattern of the next level of weaponry that's being requested is denied or delayed. I mean, do you think Germany will eventually do that?
We've included the long-range missiles into what we are willing to support Ukraine with. The moment that this can be done, that needs to be defined still, but we are in it as long as it takes.
So, Ambassador, on the U.S. Situation, the comments from former President Trump, you know, it seems like this war will last beyond the U.S. election cycle, and you've heard what he said, you know, about NATO and how he feels about it, and your country's right there on the doorstep and have had a heightened posture on this forever, essentially. How concerning are those comments from the former president to your government?
Look, on one hand, Poland's levels of spending are quite high. We are at the 4% GDP spent for military, for defense. On the other hand, the alliance NATO is not a club, it's not a business club, and the Polish minister Radek Sikorski has said that a couple of times. When we've gone to Afghanistan supporting United States within the NATO framework, we did not send a bill to Washington because this is an agreement which has more sense than business. At the same time, I would advise caution because in the first elections that former President Trump took part in, he was also called you know, a supporter of Russia and Putin and in so many ways. When he was the president, that was not the case. He worked with us, including with Poland, very closely on working on Russia in terms of energy, in terms of Russian outrageous actions. So, you know, one sphere is politics, elections. The other thing is something that will happen in the end. And I think the positions of the Canadian government in that regard are you know, well placed. So
High Commissioner, as wars drag on, fatigue sets in. You know, dissatisfaction with the high cost. Financially and in other ways, it grows. I mean, we're seeing this in the United States. That's speaking to a constituency. We're seeing it here in Canada. And with the conflict now raging in the Middle East, the security focus has shifted for a lot of people to the Israel-Hamas war. How challenging is it for the allies to keep support, to keep the focus and keep the urgency behind the defense of Ukraine?
Well, I'd just say two things about that. The reason that we need Ukraine to prevail is not just because we should all be outraged by the invasion of a sovereign democratic state and we should all be determined to see Ukraine prevail, but it's also because we should ask ourselves, who else is watching? What message are we sending if we don't stand up to this outrage? What will others take away from this? That is really important. And look, I understand it's really difficult to ask people to spend money on defence. We're all going through cost of living challenges at the moment, and there are tough choices to be made. But in Vilnius last year, we all committed to spending 2% on our defence as members of NATO. It's really important that we're prepared to do that because that is our collective best guarantee of security. Yes, and I realise I'm asking you all these questions as a citizen of a country that is not near the 2%. Canada's just above 1.3. You know, when you look at this, Deputy Ambassador, what is at stake? That if war becomes an option for expanding your territory, becomes an option, you know, for changing the situation if Russia should somehow prevail. Do you think citizens, as this has gone on and other conflicts rage, see those stakes as clearly as perhaps people in the diplomatic world do?
In Germany, I suppose they do. I think the difficulty is with countries that are further away. But we see the repercussions. I mean, we've welcomed more than 1 million Ukrainian refugees in our country. So we they are our neighbors. They are telling us every day what is on the line. So I suppose that's, the cost is high, but we understand that it's a war right in our immediate neighborhood.
So Ambassador, it really is your immediate neighborhood, and as we've heard from President Zelensky this week, they abandoned an eastern Ukrainian city this week to the Russians because they didn't have the ammunition. When you look at the state of the battlefield, what are your concerns about how this conflict is going as we enter the third year?
This is an immediate neighborhood of NATO, of all of us. NATO, many countries within the transatlantic sphere live in, and rightly so, in an atmosphere of comfort. Mm-hmm. But the world is changing. The world outside of NATO is changing. Right now, Putin is looking at NATO, at the alliance, and in Poland we know how he thinks. He thinks we are weak and lazy, and this is not true, obviously, because we are allies. We work hand in hand, and we've done a lot. But Moscow, Putin understands only the language of strength. No language of negotiations, at this point, at least in this situation, is advisable. And all the conversations, whether we are not, whether Mr. Putin does not get a little bit too angry with us for doing what we're doing, those conversations are unfortunately taking place in all of our countries, and they're wrong. They're wrong because only the language of strength is understood by Kremlin. And this is the way we should approach the topic. We should invest more, send more money. In Afghanistan, our countries spend trillions of dollars, while for Ukraine, by this point, it's only billions.
But I've seen some analysis, and I don't know if you agree with this, that right now Russia may be winning on the ground war in Ukraine. After the counteroffensive took back half the territory, the momentum has gone the other way, and a country with an economy roughly the size of Spain has been able to withstand this for 2 years and push back deeper into Ukraine. I mean, do you share that assessment? Do you believe that this is what is happening on the battlefield right now?
I learned a couple of things from that conflict. From the very beginning, I learned that one has to be very careful when listening to so-called wise men and experts. They were so many times mistaken all the way. So right now, it's not. We should not think whether it's time to stop because maybe no. There are all the reasons, as High Commissioner mentioned, the international logic, international law, the future incentives for us. Everything tells us that that we should not stop in any way, but we need to support Ukrainians in winning the war, preserving their independence, sovereignty, culture, traditions, language, because all those things are to be eradicated by Russia. And Poles know that very well, Ukrainians know this very well, because we've been in this position a number of times in history vis-a-vis Russia, unfortunately.
High Commissioner, we're out of time, but I just want to give you the last word. What would be the #1 thing you think right now that the allies and Western and NATO members can do for Ukraine?
It's commitment to stay the course. We've got to be with Ukraine until Ukraine prevails and not falter in that. As I said earlier, we have the resources to do it. We have an economy that is between us 25 times the size of Russia. We need to show now we've got the collective will.
High Commissioner, Deputy Ambassador, thank you so much for your time today.